Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW. Or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
From the National, Friday the 25th of March 2022, from the news section, Climate Strike, Scotland's pupils to march for first time since COP26. Article by Gregor Young. School children and students across Scotland will take to the streets on Friday for the first time since COP26 as they strike to demand climate action. Striking pupils will skip school to join thousands across the globe to call for more to be done to protect the world's climate and environment. The strikes in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dumfries, Falkirk, Inverness, Stirling, Ullapool will be among more than 700 protests worldwide as part of the Fridays for Future movement, which became a global phenomenon when Greta Thunberg refused to go to school in August 2019. Teenage campaigner Kerej Goff from Langholm said, "We cannot afford to delay anymore, which is why we're taking to the streets again." The 18-year-old added, "The science is clear. We've already seen irreversible damage caused by the climate crisis, and the recent IPCC report declared a code red situation." The last time young people took part in the climate strikes in Scotland was in November, when thousands took to the streets of Glasgow to demand that the world leaders gathered in the city for COP26 do more to stop climate change. Cora Gibson, 15, from Edinburgh, said people did not need to wait for the next COP to act in the climate crisis. Governments could be investing in renewable energy, phasing out fossil fuels, improving public transport, making our houses less reliant on fossil fuels, and so much more, the activist said. And ahead of the march, Shai O'Connor said a handful of oil companies had made billions in profit, but that the people in the lowest incomes are being forced into fuel poverty, being forced into choosing between heating their homes or feeding their families. The 19-year-old climate striker from Glasgow said, "That's a complete failure. We must prioritise people over profit." At 11 a.m. in the capital, activists will march from the Scottish Parliament up the Royal Mile to the Edinburgh City Chambers. Strikers in Dumfries, Falkirk and Inverness will be holding their protests at the same time. Glasgow will see climate strikers rally in George Square at midday. Stirling will see protesters at Port Street from 2 p.m. and in Ullapool, activists will be out from 8:30 a.m. And that article is by Gregor Young. From the National, Friday the 25th of March 2022, from the news section, P&O boss must quit over brazen admission he broke law, Grant Shapps says. By Hamish Morrison, political reporter. The Transport Secretary has called for the head of P&O Ferries to quit after his brazen admission that he had knowingly broken the law by sacking 800 staff without warning. Grant Shapps also vowed to force the company to U-turn and pay its crews the minimum wage. It comes after Chief Executive Peter Hebblethwaite admitted the ferry giant broke employment law when it sacked 800 workers without notice. The Transport Secretary told Sky News on Friday, "I thought what the boss of P&O said yesterday about knowingly breaking the law was brazen and breathtaking and showed incredible arrogance. I cannot believe he can stay in that role having admitted to deliberately go out and use a loophole. Well, break the law, but also to use a loophole." Pressed on whether he meant that he was calling for Mr. Hebblethwaite to resign right now, he said, "Yes." On Thursday, Mr. Hebblethwaite was urged by MPs to quit after acknowledging there is absolutely no doubt that the ferry operator was required to consult with trade unions. The company replaced its crews with cheaper agency workers last week. The chief executive admitted that the new crews are being paid below the UK's minimum wage, apart from on domestic routes, but has insisted this is allowed under international maritime rules. Mr. Hebblethwaite, whose basic annual salary is £325,000, revealed that the average hourly pay of the new crew is only £5.50. The minimum wage in the UK for people aged 23 and above is £8.91 per hour. Mr Sharp said the government is planning to change the law to ensure companies working for British ports pay people the minimum wage, as he condemned P&O for evilly exploiting loopholes. He said the move from the government would force a U-turn on what's happened at P&O. What I'm going to do is to come to Parliament this week with a package of measures which will both close every possible loophole that exists and force them to U-turn on this, he said. We are not having people working from British ports, plying regular routes between here in France or here in Holland or anywhere else, and failing to pay the minimum wage. It's simply unacceptable, and we will force that to change. The Minister told BBC Breakfast that maritime law was very, very complex, but that he was preparing a package of about 8 different measures to bring to Parliament, where he believed there was very, very broad parliamentary agreement that new legislation was needed. P&O will need to re-employ people on proper salaries, he said, confirming this will mean national minimum wage. Mr Sharp said the government can't directly revoke P&O's licence when asked why the company was still operating after having broken the law. He said he had instead to ask the Maritime Coast Guard Agency to carry out very detailed inspections. The Minister said if the new crews were being paid under the national minimum wage and found to be unfamiliar with equipment, the ship would be deemed unsafe to sail. Mr Sharps also said P&O ferries had attempted to pay off their staff with higher redundancy payments and therefore buy their silence. As to how government plans to change the law would help sacked seafarers, the Transport Secretary said, I actually happen to know because I've been speaking with some of them that some of them have already taken up a job, so they may not get those particular ones back. I suspect they'll get some of them back, although I imagine they'll have a slightly rather jaded view of their employer as P&O. Mr Hebblethwaite on Thursday told a joint section of the Commons Transport and Business Select Committees that Mr Sharps knew about the intention to cut jobs in November last year, although that was strongly denied by the Department for Transport. Asked about the claim, Mr Sharp said it was a way to distract attention from its failure to provide notice of job cuts. The Transport Secretary also said he didn't see an email sent round Whitehall about P&O's plans the night before the mass sackings and was told at the dispatch box. Asked who the email would have been sent off to if not the Transport Secretary, he said, well, I think it was sent to a very small group of officials in order to record a conversation, the notes of a conversation that happened. Mr Sharps added, frankly, even if I had known the night before, which I didn't, they'd already broken the law by not providing 45 days notice, by using the Cyprus flag to get around it. The Rail, Maritime and Transport Union said it will be meeting with P&O Ferries on Friday to demand the reinstatement of the sacked seafarers. TUC General Secretary Francis O'Grady said it was a watershed moment for the UK shipping industry and workers' rights. P&O's owner must be given pariah status and lose all its government shipping and freeport contracts with immediate effect until workers are reinstated. And that article is by Hamish Morrison. From the National, Friday the 25th of March 2022, from the news section, Ukrainians in Scotland ensured NHS access, by Sean Bell. An amendment to current legislation will ensure that Ukrainians in Scotland will be able to access NHS services at no charge, the Scottish Government has confirmed. This amendment will allow refugees from the war in Ukraine coming to Scotland to make use of services including maternity care, mental health care and treatment for specific conditions. Under current law, anyone making an application for asylum in the UK or who has been granted asylum status is technically eligible for the full range of NHS services at no charge. However, Ukrainians arriving in the UK under visa routes thus far announced by the UK government will be charged for some NHS Scotland services. The Scottish Amendment, which would apply to people from Ukraine who were in Scotland on short-term visas when the conflict began and who are applying to extend or switch visas because they cannot return to their home country, will rectify this. This follows emergency legislation which came into effect earlier this week, allowing Ukrainians in Scotland to meet residency conditions for Scottish social benefits, ensuring immediate access for those who are eligible to benefits including Scottish child payments and child disability payment. Commenting, Health Secretary Hamza Yousaf said, "We are determined to do everything in our power to give displaced people from Ukraine the warmest possible welcome when they arrive, and this includes offering healthcare to those who need it. We fully recognise that they may have been through very traumatic experiences and could require specialist treatment and care. Removing charges for healthcare and providing access to benefits is a practical step in ensuring those who have been forced to flee their homes and country can live safely and comfortably in Scotland for as long as they need to." The Scottish Government has said it will keep the exemption from the NHS charges under review as the situation in Ukraine develops. And that article was by Sean Bell.
You're listening to The National as published on Friday the 25th of March 2022. Comment. As the cost of living crisis bites, shopping local could offer some solution. By Ruth Watson, founder of the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign. During the winter, before the spring sun coaxed my hens back into lay, I asked my local dairy to deliver some eggs along with my usual doorstep delivery of delicious milk, fresh from farms within cycling distance of my door. The box of eggs brought a smile to my face. On the front, chickens in kilts play the pipe and drum with the slogan, "True Scottish free-range eggs, only the shell can tell," with a clear guide inside the lid explaining the stamped code on the eggs. "A nice bright box catches folks' attention and they remember your eggs," Brian Blythe explains. His family have been selling eggs to communities in Fife and beyond for more than 60 years. His company, D. Blythe and Sons Limited, has won many awards for quality. Brian knows Scotland's name is an important selling point. Scotland's always had a good reputation for high-quality food. The code on the egg is for traceability. The country of origin often is represented by a number, but the industry here fought hard to make sure SCO was on the egg. We in the trade immediately know what the codes mean, but it's harder for customers, so we decided to put all the information in the egg box. A lot of people like to know where their food comes from. Egg farmers are facing challenging times. There is a virulent bird flu coursing through the wild bird population, and last November hens across Scotland were ordered into flockdown on Scottish Government orders. This order has been extended into April. There is a strict limit on the length of time birds can be kept in house conditions yet still be called free range, and that limit is passed this week. Labels which say barn eggs laid by free-range hens temporarily housed in barns for their well-being are being added to many egg cartons. In 2018, Scotland had 8.6 million laying chickens in a sector valued at £88 million. With 12% of the UK's production, our farmers produce enough to keep our country in eggs, a crucial self-sufficiency as we face uncertain times, and yet rising costs are hitting farmers hard. At the moment, there is a slight oversupply of eggs and retailers know they can pull the price they pay down, even though farmers are facing steeply rising costs, says Matthew Steele, a third-generation egg farmer on the outskirts of Forfar and National Farmers Union of Scotland representative for Angus. After Russia started the war in Ukraine, the price of chicken feed here went up £100 a tonne over the course of a week. That adds 20 pence per dozen to the cost of eggs, but supermarkets won't pay that. Farmers will go out of business at a time we need them the most. Matthew is critical of the Westminster approach to farming, but is hopeful things will improve for Scottish farmers, with the Scottish Government paying close attention to farming and food security. Agriculture is devolved and the Cabinet Secretary, Mary Gugan, is working with farmers. Policies are being developed to grow the food we need while protecting Scotland's environment. There is a significant opportunity to get things right. And what part can we play in all this? What can we do to get things right for our communities? Brian Blythe believes the shop local movement is the way to go. During lockdown, our van drivers were out every day making sure our local shops had eggs on the shelves when the supermarkets had nothing. Most of our customers have stayed loyal to us and will do our best to keep costs down for them. An egg is the perfect food, even for folk on tight budgets. It's a meal in itself and quick to cook. It's the ideal food. This could well be a tough year for many of us with a cost of living crisis Westminster refuses to control. Supporting local food and drink businesses is one way we can build resilience into our communities. This article was by Ruth Watson.
This article is from the Glasgow Times, date 25th March 2022, from the Lifestyle section. Glasgow street food favourites join line-up for Paisley Food and Drink Festival, by Sarah Campbell. One of Scotland's largest outdoor food and drink festivals will return to Paisley Town Centre next month. The Paisley Food and Drink Festival will take place at Abbey Close and Bridge Street on Friday 29th and Saturday 30th April for a weekend full of foodie fun. With more than 30 traders set to attend, festival goers can prepare for a mix of street food, licensed bars, and a huge programme of live music and entertainment. Organisers of the event are working alongside Glasgow's platform to bring the best of the city's food scene on tour. Expect to see familiar faces like Kachichi Sri Lankan street food, Freddie and Hicks, Hector and Harriet artisan food, coffee and cocktails, and Mosquito Spanish Bites make an appearance. Catherine McCormick, General Manager at Platform, said, "We are delighted to bring Platform on tour back to Paisley Food and Drink Festival for our first outdoor venture since 2019. It's always a brilliant event to be part of, and we hope everyone enjoys sampling the amazing food our Platform traders have to offer and visit our own bar. Fingers crossed for some sunshine." A dedicated beer tent from Renfrewshire Camera, or Campaign for Real Ale, will showcase a huge range of craft beers and ales over the weekend, perfect to be enjoyed while taking in some musical performances curated by the Rum Shack and Paisley's famous The Bungalow. Louisa Mann, Head of Marketing Communications and Events at Renfrewshire Council, said, "We are delighted to welcome everyone along to Paisley Food and Drink Festival next month, and it's brilliant to be back in person after a 3-year wait. Paisley Food and Drink Festival is Renfrewshire Council's first major event of 2022, hot on the heels of About Us, which saw almost 50,000 visitors celebrate the start of unboxed celebrations across the UK. The festival is one of the largest food and drink events in Scotland, with people travelling from all over to enjoy everything that the event and Paisley has to offer." That article was by Sarah Campbell. This article is from The National, date 28th March 2022, from the News section. RBS parent NatWest returns to private control as UK sells shares, by Gregor Young. The UK government has ceded control of Royal Bank of Scotland parent firm NatWest after nearly a decade after taxpayers' cash was used to prop up the banking giant during the financial crisis. The Treasury said it has sold £1.2 billion worth of shares in NatWest Group. RBS rebanded in 2020, taking its stake to less than 50%. Economic Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, said, "This sale means that the government is no longer the majority owner of NatWest Group and is therefore an important landmark in our plan to return the bank to the private sector. We will continue to prioritise delivering value for money for the taxpayer as we take forward this plan." In 2008, the government started to build a stake in the group following the financial crash which had left it teetering on the brink of collapse. The initial investment, which saw the government owning 57% of the bank, was extended a couple of times before peaking at 84% in 2009. The Treasury has been selling off its stake since 2015, and the latest sale takes its ownership from 50.6% to 48.1%. NatWest said the latest deal saw it buying 550 million shares at around £2.21 each. The process of selling off NatWest shares is likely to continue for some time to come, and has already taken considerably longer than the sell-off of Lloyds. The government's stake in Lloyds Bank, which hit more than 43% following the financial crash, was totally unwound in 2017. NatWest is far off this level. The government was handed its shares in the bank in 2008 after announcing a £37 billion injection of capital into the sector. Then Prime Minister Gordon Brown was clear at the time that it was not an attempt to nationalise the banks, but they would be sold back at the right time. That article was by Gregor Young. This article is from The National, date 28th March 2022, from the Politics section. SNP say Tories dragging Scotland back on moves towards equality. By Jane MacLeod. Scottish independence is necessary to escape a Tory poverty trap, which could leave 500,000 children deprived, the SNP have said. SNP Shadow Chancellor Alison Thewliss MP warned Westminster is actively undermining Scotland's efforts to tackle poverty and exacerbating the problem, following cuts, tax hikes and a disgraceful spring statement. Thewliss pointed to the approach of the SNP to tackle poverty, citing the introduction and doubling of the Scottish Child Payment, uprating benefits, a council tax reduction scheme, and spending £71 million on discretionary housing payments which mitigate the hardship caused by the Westminster bedroom tax. The Scottish Government is also providing the most support to families in the UK, including a real living wage for the public sector, free personal and nursing care, free university tuition, free bus travel for eligible people, and lower average council tax and water rates. The SNP MP said Westminster has slashed universal credit by £1,040, hiked VAT and national insurance, and cut the triple lock on pensions. The SNP said that the Tories had presided over stagnant real wages and imposed damaging policies that have made people poorer, including a hard Brexit costing the economy billions. The Resolution Foundation says an additional 1.3 million people will be pushed into absolute poverty by next year, including 500,000 children. Thewliss said, "The past decade has shown that independence is the only way to keep Scotland safe from Tory austerity cuts and damaging Westminster decisions like Brexit. Only with the full powers of independence can Scotland escape the damage of Westminster control and build a fair society where we can eradicate poverty. For every step Scotland takes towards tackling poverty, Westminster is dragging us back. Rishi Sunak's spring budget was a disgrace which showed how completely out of touch with hard-pressed families he is. He hasn't got a clue about the impact of rising poverty." She added, "The Tories will always prioritise making the rich richer over helping the poor, and Scotland will always be hamstrung under the Westminster control." The SNP will continue to press the UK Government for a meaningful package of support for families, but only the full powers of independence can guarantee a fairer and more prosperous future for Scotland. That article was by Jane MacLeod.
From The National, Monday the 28th of March 2022. From the comment section, J.K. Rowling's words being used by Putin does not come as a shock. By Stephen Payton. For anyone paying attention, Vladimir Putin's latest comments on the nature of so-called cancel culture or, for that matter, his claims to have found an ally in author J.K. Rowling in the fight against woke politics and transgender rights, won't be a surprise. The Russian leader's statement that Rowling had been cancelled just because she didn't satisfy the demands of gender rights is a talking point ripped directly from the headlines of the British press itself in its attacks on progressive politics and the advancement of the rights of the transgender community in the UK. Her writing has been repeatedly cited, not just by Putin, but by other far-right activists and politicians, to justify increasingly vitriolic behaviour and restrictive legislation aimed at the LGBTQ+ community. One example, under Trump's regime, Republican Senator James Lankford quoted Rowling back in 2020 as justification to block consideration of the Equality Act, an LGBTQ civil rights bill that would have added sexual orientation and gender identity to a list of protected classes. I'm left wondering at what point, as a supposed liberal, do you start to question why far-right regimes, Britain's infinitely reactionary press, and supporters of violent anti-LGBT bills around the world keep using your words as justification, while the majority of the LGBTQ+ community have condemned you? That moment of introspection does not appear to be forthcoming. Only a few weeks ago, Rowling sent big love on Twitter to activist Caroline Farrow. Farrow is the UK and Ireland director of Citizen Go, an ultra-conservative activist group that in 2013 actually backed Russia's gay propaganda laws, which sought to protect children from homosexuals. I have little sympathy for the position that Rowling has put herself in now. The frustrating aspect of this is that cancel culture does actually exist, just not in the way that our press and the political right have bastardised it. There are legitimate criticisms to be made of well-intentioned but overzealous activists who fail to put restorative justice at the heart of their work, despite paying lip service to it, or straight-up bad actors who use it for their own purposes. But millionaire authors with seemingly limitless access to the press are certainly not the ones having to deal with it. Instead, what opponents of transgender liberation often refer to as cancel culture could better be described as a simple criticism or, in other cases, the consequences of their own actions. Graham Linehan is the all-too relevant example of this. Linehan appeared this week on the BBC in tears, claiming that trans activists took everything from me. They took my family. As someone who Linehan previously tweeted out photos of to encourage social media users to mock my appearance, alongside many other comments that ultimately got his account banned from Twitter, I can safely say that trans people did not take his wife from him. And, in that sense, Putin framing himself as cancelled rather than facing the consequences of being an invading imperialist war criminal feels oddly familiar. His comments are not, as some have claimed, some clever ploy to sow division in the West. Frankly, it's remarkable to think that people care enough about J.K. Rowling's opinions in the trans community that a nation could be destabilised over them. No, his statement is entirely in line with his consistent posturing on LGBT rights for years, from his anti-gay propaganda laws, backed by Rowling's Big Love allies in 2013, to his contemporary comments on the West's alleged moral decline, through the acceptance of trans identities. And Rowling's name and words being used by far right-wing and anti-LGBT plus politicians is nothing out with the normal for those fueling the global backlash to equality that we have witnessed over the past 5 or 6 years. The reality is that in nations that have implemented self-declaration policies for transgender people, none of the warned of consequences have ever come to pass. Statistically, trans people remain more likely to be attacked and face violence than to instigate it. As long as Rowling's writing, in my opinion, continues to misrepresent an entire minority group with cherry-picked data and disinformation, her words will continue to be used to call for the restricting and rolling back of the rights and protections of the LGBTQ+ community by those who have only the empty rhetoric to justify themselves, and distancing himself from it will never be an option. And that was a comment piece by Stephen Payton. From The National, Monday the 28th of March 2022. From the comments section, Kirsty Strickland, spring is finally here and life-affirming chats with my neighbours are back. After what felt like the longest winter in living memory, Spring has finally sprung, and what a sight it is. There is nothing so beautiful as colourful buds unfurling after a deep sleep. The blue sky is offering reassurance that we won't need a jacket today. In other parts of the world, a steady 16 degrees Celsius probably feels a bit chilly. In Scotland, it feels like a gift. In our street, spring also heralds the start of the social season. As soon as the sun comes out, we're able to sit outside without the risk of frostbite. The front gardens become places to reconnect, exchange gossip, and drink glasses of wine with those neighbours we didn't see much of during winter. The other day, I headed out with my book, expecting and hoping that my reading would be regularly interrupted with folks stopping for a natter. And it was. One neighbour stopped to tell me about an upcoming appointment he has with the dentist. Another chatted to me about her son's wedding. There was baby news, long overdue catch-ups, and some scandalous tales about the antics from down the other end of the road. Despite being more antisocial than most, and a devoted hater of small talk, I genuinely love spending time with my neighbours. They are cool and clever, and I only ever have to walk a few metres to see them. What's not to like? At the weekend, I was in a bad mood. The kind of bad mood that sees you in the grip of self-indulgent melancholy. So I decided to be proactive. I went to the garden and waited for one of my pensioner pals in the street to cheer me up. I didn't have to wait long before the matriarch herself appeared. She is the stalwart of the street, the OG, my next door neighbour, and somebody I love dearly. The other day, she asked me to wash down the chairs in her garden, and that's when I knew that spring had officially begun. We sat side by side and spoke of love and loss, which, while not the most cheerful topic of conversation, snapped me out of my trivial moodiness almost instantly. Later, like a mirage in the desert, our friend from the next close along appeared. Even after living here for 10 years, I still found her beauty and elegance quite intimidating. As well as looking like a movie star from Hollywood's golden age, she is also full of mischief and good humour. She joined me in the matriarch and immediately started quizzing me about a man I had been dating. Advice was dispensed and gratefully received. A group of enterprising wee girls from further down the road had procured bunches of cheerful daffodils from somewhere, best not to ask questions, and handed them out to us on their way past. Dogs and their owners stopped to say hello. I received advice about the unidentifiable plant in my garden, a hydrangea apparently, which is flourishing despite my wanton neglect. My Hollywood movie star neighbour told me to cut it back in May, and then, knowing me as well as she does by now, promised that she would remind me again nearer the time. As more neighbours joined in the hours after, the cups of tea were replaced with wine. Despite being the youngest member of the gang by a few decades, I'm always the first one to call it a night. But there is something immensely comforting about being able to hear the life in our street streaming in through the bedroom window. We know this spring is going to bring challenges. The cost of living crisis is a present and looming danger. We can already feel the pressure, but we know the worst is yet to come. COVID case numbers are skyrocketing and, despite the hugely successful vaccination programme, it's hard not to worry that we're being lulled into a false sense of security. The weather might be beautiful, but the news is still bleak. Fiscal buffers to protect the public from the worst of the cost of living crisis and measures to stop the spread of the coronavirus are in the hands of politicians. We're not entirely powerless, but the levers that could make a tangible difference are not in our control. Which is reassuring in an odd way. It frees us up to savour moments of welcome distraction from the gloom, wherever we can find them. Some find that peace through exercise, sport, nights out, or the latest box set. I find it always, reliably and gratefully, in the company of my neighbours. So I'm going to ignore the doomsday forecast of snow later this week. I'm hoping for another week of sunny spring with the people I am lucky enough to live alongside. And that piece was from the comment section by Kirsty Strickland. From the National, Tuesday the 29th of March 2022. From the news section, P&O Ferries Chief Executive to be grilled at Scottish Parliament. By Gregor Young. MSPs are set to grill the boss of P&O Ferries after the firm sacked 800 seafarers and replace them with agency staff on sub-minimum wage pay. Tuesday's appearance in the Scottish Parliament comes after the company announced earlier this month that it would be sacking 800 seafarers and replacing them with agency staff, with workers being told by video message. Peter Hebblethwaite will face Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee after having already set for a Westminster committee last week. Meanwhile, the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, MCA, announced it has detained a second P&O ferry. The MCA said it was in the process of holding the Pride of Kent on Monday. A spokesperson for the MCA said, "Our surveyors are in the process of detailing the Pride of Kent. We are awaiting confirmation of all the detainable items." On Monday, UK Transport Secretary Grant Shapps warned Hebblethwaite that a package of measures was being pursued to block the sacking of staff. In a letter on Monday, Shapps said, "I will be bringing a comprehensive package of measures to Parliament to ensure that seafarers are protected against these type of actions in the way that Parliament and this government has already intended. Throughout that package, I intend to block the outcome that P&O Ferries has pursued, including paying workers less than the minimum wage." The measures could be revealed as early as Wednesday. Hebblethwaite has also been criticised north of the border, with Ferry Minister Nicola Sturgeon saying she had made clear her utter disgust at the job cuts. Committee convener Dean Lockhart wrote to Mr Hebblethwaite on the day of the decision, urging him to appear as soon as possible. He wrote, "The Net Zero Energy and Transport Committee is extremely concerned about yesterday's news that around 800 of P&O staff have been sacked, reportedly with immediate effect, and that services, including the Carnryan Larne line, have been suspended, ruining passengers' travel plans. I am writing to request an urgent update so that the committee may reflect on its immediate scrutiny in relation to this matter." And that article is by Gregor Young. From the National, Tuesday the 29th of March 2022, from the news section, Partygate scandal, police to issue 20 fines in Downing Street probe. By Angus Cochrane. Police investigating the Partygate scandal are handing out an initial 20 fines to alleged attendees of bashes at Downing Street and Whitehall. The Metropolitan Police announced on Tuesday that investigators will begin to refer the notices to the ACRO Criminal Records Office, which would be responsible for issuing the penalties. It is expected that further fines could be issued as officers continue to go through the evidence gathered. The force is investigating at least 12 events, including 6 the Prime Minister is thought to have attended. The identities of those issued with fines will not be disclosed by Scotland Yard, although Downing Street has said it will confirm if Johnson has handed a fixed penalty notice, FPN. The initial wave of fines is not expected to include the Prime Minister, who was one of dozens of people issued with a police questionnaire to account for his actions, as he is contesting the allegations and took advice from his personal lawyer on how to respond. The Metropolitan Police said, "The investigation into allegations of breaches of COVID-19 regulations in Whitehall and Downing Street has now progressed to the point where the first referrals for fixed penalty notices, FPN, will be made to ACRO Criminal Records Office. We will today initially begin to refer 20 fixed penalty notices to be issued for breaches of COVID-19 regulations. The ACRO Criminal Records Office will then be responsible for issuing the FPNs to the individual following the referrals from the MPS. We're making every effort to progress this investigation at speed and have completed a number of assessments. However, due to the significant amount of investigative material that remains to be assessed, further referrals may be made to ACRO if the evidential threshold is made. The Met would not confirm how many individuals will receive fines. It is possible some people will receive multiple penalties if they attended more than one event, or their identities. The force will also not disclose which parties the fines relate to. The Met said the move was in line with the College of Policing guidance on not revealing the identities of people dealt with out of court. Johnson came under intense pressure to quit as a result of the Partygate scandal, but in recent weeks, the war in Ukraine has seen the Tory MPs rally round the leader at a time of international crisis. But the Met's intervention, confirming it believes laws were broken at the heart of government, could reignite the debate about his leadership. Government Minister Will Quince said the gatherings which took place during coronavirus restrictions shouldn't have happened, but it would be inappropriate to comment further. I completely understand the considerable upset caused. The events that took place shouldn't have happened, he told Sky News. But I hope you'll understand that both as an education minister, but more importantly, as an outgoing Metropolitan Police investigation, it's just not appropriate that I comment. He said questions over whether the Prime Minister should resign and fined were hypothetical, but also said Johnson had committed to publish a full report by senior official Sue Gray into the scandal as soon as the Metropolitan Police have concluded their investigation. Quince added, looking at the moment over in Ukraine, and even worse over in Russia, I think it's a brilliant thing that we have a free press in this country that is able to ask these kinds of questions. More than 100 police questionnaires has been sent out to people at the gatherings. These events included a Bring Your Own Booze gathering, details of which were emailed to staff at Number 10 by the Prime Minister's Principal Private Secretary Martin Reynolds in May 2020, and a surprise get-together for Johnson's birthday in June 2020. Johnson previously admitted he was at the socially distanced drinks organised by Reynolds for the 25 minutes, claiming he believed it was a work event, while Downing Street said staff gathered briefly in the Cabinet Room to mark the Prime Minister's 56th birthday. The police are also investigating a party in Johnson's Downing Street flat on November the 13th, 2020, reportedly hosted by his wife Carrie on the night of the Prime Minister's controversial aide Dominic Cummings' acrimonious exit from Number 10. In January, Civil Servant Gray published a report into the allegations of the parties, which said there were failures of leadership and judgment in parts of Number 10 and the Cabinet Office, while England was under coronavirus restrictions in 2020 and 2021. The initial publication contained limited detail due to the police investigation, but a fuller report is expected once the Met's inquiry concludes. And that article is by Angus Cochrane.
From the National, Tuesday the 29th of March 2022, from the sports section. Failure is not an option during an all-or-nothing April for Rangers and Giovanni van Bronckhorst, by Christopher Jack. It is all or nothing in April. The stakes could not be higher, and the rewards of success are as significant as the price of failure for Rangers. It is the kind of run that should be relished rather than feared, one which offers opportunities that players can usually only dream of. Time will tell if it turns into a nightmare for Giovanni van Bronckhorst and his Ibrox squad. The next handful of fixtures won't just shape the remainder of the campaign for Rangers as legacies are built or damaged. The coming seasons may well be defined by what unfolds at home and abroad, and what medals, if any, are collected come the end of the campaign. Some matches can be classed as must not lose. The majority only fall into the must-win category, however, and the achievement of such an ambition would lay the foundations for a potential treble that would be as historic as it is unlikely. Two Old Firm fixtures, the first in the Premiership and the second in the Scottish Cup semi-finals, are already pencilled in. A third, on either matchday 34 or 35 of the league term, will surely follow once the SPFL computer is fired up to determine the post-split schedule. There may yet be another European tie to fit in as well. If Braga can be overcome in the quarters, the first round of a semi-final with RB Leipzig or Atalanta will await next month. The trip to St Mirren on Sunday the 10th of April doesn't have the standing of the other matches, but it carries its own importance in the title race now that the finishing line is in sight. Failure is quite simply not an option for Van Bronckhorst. This is the most defining period of his tenure so far, and questions will be raised about the Dutchman if he is ultimately left empty-handed and cannot prevent Celtic harbouring treble dreams of their own. Victory at Ibrox this weekend is non-negotiable. The deficit to Celtic may only stand at 3 points, but the goal difference advantage, currently standing at 14, that Ange Postecoglou's side enjoy, all but counts for another point given that just 7 matches remain in the Premiership. Rangers face the prospect of having to win every one of those encounters to defend their title. It would be a run deserving of being crowned as champions, but it is a prospect that appears to be a tall order given their patchy league form in recent times. 4 points from the Old Firm showdowns could just about be considered good enough, but their fate would then be in Celtic's hands. If the Hoops win at Ibrox, they will have a loose grip on the silverware. The same scenario would unfold if Postecoglou's side were to emerge victorious at Hampden a fortnight later. Once again, Derby Day will make or break medal motivations. The failure to lift a domestic cup was the obvious black mark on Steven Gerrard's Ibrox resume. Having watched the League Cup humbling by Hibernian from the stands, Van Bronckhorst must now achieve what his predecessor couldn't. Seeing off Celtic would put the former Ibrox midfielder just 90 minutes and a victory over Hibs or Hearts away from achieving that goal. It would be a success that would be celebrated, but there will be a sense of anticlimax if that is all that Rangers have to show for their efforts this term. The Premiership must be the priority. The Europa League is a welcome bonus, but it remains the longest shot for Rangers given the obstacles that still stand in their way on the continent. Lifting a European trophy in the year of the club's 150th celebrations and the 50th anniversary of Barcelona would be the most lauded achievement in Rangers history. If Van Bronckhorst's side can somehow go all the way and win in Seville, their place in Ibrox folklore would be enshrined forever. For the heroes of 55, it would secure legendary status. There is an understandable confidence that Braga can be beaten, but the challenge presented by Leipzig or Atalanta would be considerable. Come the final, Barcelona looks set to lie in wait, and the gamble, both in terms of glory and the Champions League millions on the line, would be stacked against Rangers in that scenario. Everyone at Ibrox is entitled to dare to dream. Such opportunities are what the love of the game is built upon, and why so much is invested, both emotionally and financially, in the support of clubs and those who represent them. It was natural that last season, given the hyperbole around 55 and 10 in a row, was given the billing that it was. But it is this Premiership title that is the most significant of recent times, the one which will shape the Old Firm future for the foreseeable. At a basic level, it is all about the money. More specifically, it is about the Champions League cheque that awaits the Premiership winners this term, and whoever banks it will put themselves in the driving seat to go on and enjoy further domestic successes and perhaps continental sojourns in the coming season. The status of the Ibrox squad is well known, and Rangers require that cash to fund the next evolution as players prepare to move on for a variety of reasons this summer. If Van Bronckhorst can't deliver this term, he will make his job next season increasingly difficult as Celtic look to kick on under Postecoglou's guidance. The 47-year-old knows that winning is all that matters at Rangers. He enjoyed his fair share of triumphs during his playing career, but landing the Premiership title or the Europa League crown would top anything that he achieved during his 3 seasons in Glasgow. There is scope for unrivalled success this month and in the weeks that follow, but Rangers enter this period under no illusions about the absence of any margin for error at home and abroad. The champions will bid for it all. They cannot afford to be left with nothing this term. This article was by Christopher Jack.
From The National of Tuesday the 29th of March 2022, from the comment section, The Real Scottish Politics. Lesson for Scotland on Tackling Poverty is Clear, by Wee Ginger Doug. Chancellor Rishi Sunak's spring statement last week was an exercise in callous cynicism, which was shocking and breathtaking even by the standards of a Conservative government, which has elevated callous cynicism into its defining political principle. Households across the UK are facing an unprecedented rise in energy bills, bills that are going to soar even more in October when the price cap is lifted. In addition, the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, is forecasting that we will see the greatest drop in living standards in many decades as inflation rises to its highest level for more than 30 years, a situation that the OBR predicts is only going to get even worse over the months to come. Anti-poverty charities warn that the brunt of these price rises will be felt by the poorest households, many of which are already facing the choice between heating their homes or putting food on the table. The Resolution Foundation recently warned that an additional 1.3 million people across the UK will be pushed into absolute poverty by next year, a figure that includes 500,000 children. These are all problems that come on top of the damage done to the economy by Brexit. In a recent report, the OBR found that Brexit has been responsible for a veritable collapse in exports to and imports from the EU. UK exports to the EU plunged by a catastrophic £20 billion last year, down almost 12% on 2018. However, in its pursuit of votes in Leave-supporting constituencies in the Midlands and north of England, the Labour Party have become too afraid to highlight the damage caused by Brexit, in case that allows the Conservatives to paint them as unpatriotically pro-EU. The Conservatives, for their part, are too politically invested in Brexit for them to claim that it is anything other than a British lion-roaring success. For both the Labour and Conservatives, the damage caused by Brexit has become the flub that dare not speak its name. Yet, despite all this, Sunak not only chose not to give any additional help to the poorest families, his measures contained nothing for those who depend on benefits, but he chose to hold back £30 billion in available monies so that he can use them to fund a series of tax cuts in 2024, to be introduced shortly before the next general election, in order to buy that election for the Tories and to boost the only thing that really matters to this ambitious and arrogant politician, his own chances of taking over from Boris Johnson as the next Prime Minister. Scotland has very limited powers to tackle poverty and to mitigate the damage created by Conservative economic policies. However, the Scottish Government has introduced and then doubled the Scottish Child Payment, uprated those benefits which are devolved, introduced a council tax reduction scheme and spent £71 million on discretionary housing payments in order to soften the blow on the poorest households of the hardship caused by the Westminster bedroom tax. However, SNP Shadow Chancellor Alison Fulis has pointed out that all these measures are undermined by a Conservative government which has slashed universal credit by £1,040, hiked VAT and national insurance, and cut the triple lock on pensions. It's all very well to do as Labour does and demand that the Scottish Government make use of the existing powers of Holyrood and mitigate the harm caused by a Conservative government at Westminster. However, the problem is that there is a constant succession of harm that needs to be mitigated. As Fulis pointed out, for every step Scotland takes forward in tackling poverty, Westminster is dragging us back. She added, the Tories will always prioritise making the rich richer over helping the poor, and Scotland will always be hamstrung under Westminster control. The lesson is clear. If Scotland is ever to tackle poverty successfully, it can only be achieved by ensuring that Holyrood has the full powers of the Parliament of an independent state. This article was by Wee Ginger Doug.
Recorded from the National on the 29th of March 2022. From the Culture section. Roxanne Surishin. Van Morrison Gig left me with questions. By Roxanne Surishin. We did a very strange thing last week. We went to a concert. It was Van Morrison, so it was always going to be a wee bit strange. He's not the most engaging performer in terms of rapport with his audience. He appeared on stage a minute before the official time for doors to open, and then, without nary a hello to his expectant audience, proceeded to belt through a considerable repertoire with hardly a pause for breath in between, let alone chat. His voice at the age of 76 is as great as ever, and the band were fantastic. But after an hour and 40 minutes, he'd decided it was time for bed. 5 minutes through an epic rendition of Gloria, he shuffled off into the wings and failed to re-emerge to say goodbye, although it has to be said that the rest of the ensemble gave us a brilliant finale. There was another aspect of strange to the evening. It goes without saying that being able to actually attend a gig after these COVID years took a bit of getting used to, but there was an additional weird factor. I have never known such a restless audience. Loads of folk were super late, and then so many people were up and down and needing out of their seats to go to the bar or loo, or maybe just to stretch their legs. I note that last week there were calls for the return of the film intermission at cinemas. The audience at the Edinburgh Playhouse would certainly have benefited from several. Have we really forgotten how to behave in public, or have we just become too used to being an audience in our own terms, consuming catch-up TV and radio and watching box sets? Or maybe it's us. I have to admit that even before the restrictions of the pandemic, we were not exactly party animals. Our concert tickets were a kind Christmas gift from our son and his girlfriend. Enjoying as they do the flush of youth, it does not cross their young fresh minds that A. we seldom venture out to socialise after dark, and B. we certainly don't whoop it up midweek. In Edinburgh, a whole city away. But what fun we had, even if we did have to retire to our hotel room. Sorry, but we felt just too mature for the late bus home to Glasgow, for a cup of tea and a rich tea biscuit straight after the concert. Van Morrison has been a bit of a soundtrack to our life. The first of his gigs we went to was in the 1996 at Glasgow Royal Concert Hall. Thinking back, Van the man was just as grumpy then as he is now. Back then I was pregnant with the boy who, all these years later, gifted us our tickets for last week's event. I still have the t-shirt from that concert, part of the Days Like This tour. It's a little baggy at the front where a bump used to be. That concert may well have been a lifetime ago, but I remember it with clarity, and can confirm that the audience behaved impeccably and stayed firmly in their seats. When Morrison sings, grumpy or otherwise, when all the parts of the puzzle start to look like they fit, then I must remember there'll be days like this. That article was by Roxanne Surushin.
From the National, Tuesday the 29th of March 2022, from the sports section. Neil McCann pinpoints key factor in Rangers' favour ahead of Celtic clash, by Christopher Jack. Neil McCann reckons the Ibrox factor should give Rangers the edge as they bid for Old Firm success on Sunday. The champions head into the third derby clash of the campaign, knowing that defeat to Celtic would be a huge blow to their Premiership title aspirations. Giovanni van Bronckhorst's side sits 3 points adrift of their Old Firm rivals and also have a Scottish Cup semi-final and Europa League tie with Braga on the horizon this month. Celtic were comfortable 3-0 winners at Parkhead earlier in the campaign, but McCann has backed Rangers to rise to the occasion as they seek to follow up their Ibrox triumph from August. It is really hard to tell, McCann told Sky Sports. I think Celtic are in real form, really good form. I think Ange Postecoglou has got the team really firing. They look dangerous every time they get the ball. They can attack well. I think being at Ibrox, Rangers would have to fancy themselves and make themselves favourites for that. Under Giovanni, they have been excellent. Even when they don't play well, they have been getting results. The European stage has been brilliant for them, and I think that has built a real bit of confidence that when they are on it, when they play, they are a match for anyone. But this title is too close to call. This article was by Christopher Jack.
The National Politics on Wednesday the 30th of March. Dominic Raab denies Boris Johnson lied to Parliament. An article written by Angus Cochran, multimedia journalist. The Deputy Prime Minister has admitted Downing Street staff who were fined over the Partygate scandal broke the law, after Number 10 refused to acknowledge any illegality. Dominic Raab, however, denied that Boris Johnson intentionally misled Parliament when he assured MPs no rules had been breached. On Tuesday, the Metropolitan Police disclosed that 20 fixed penalty notices were being issued in relation to events at Number 10 and in Whitehall. That prompted accusations that the Prime Minister had lied to MPs about the lockdown parties, with Labour, the SNP and the Lib Dems all calling for his resignation. Yet Number 10 refused to even acknowledge that those receiving fines had broken the law. It's for the Met to make that judgment rather than the Prime Minister, his official spokesperson said. Asked on Sky News if the issuing of these fixed penalty notices meant the law had been broken, Mr Raab said, yes, inevitably fixed penalty notices are issued to those that have breached the regulations. We stand by and support the fact that there should be the Met process, the Sue Gray process and accountability. Mr Raab added, the Prime Minister has already taken responsibility for things that shouldn't have happened in Number 10. He's apologised for it, and more than that, he's overhauled Number 10. Of course, we wait to see the outcome of the conclusions of the Met process. On December the 8th, after the initial Partygate reports emerged, Mr Johnson insisted in the Commons that the claims were false. He told MPs, I've been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken. In total, the UK government is believed to have insisted at least 39 times in the first fortnight of the scandal that no rules were broken, insider reports. Mr Raab was asked whether the Met fines meant Mr Johnson had intentionally misled Parliament, which would constitute a breach of the Ministerial Code. The Deputy Prime Minister told Times Radio, no, I don't think there was an intention to mislead. The Prime Minister, in good faith, updated Parliament on what he knows. Of course, precisely because there were questions around this, the Sue Gray inquiry was set up, and precisely because it was right and proper to enable the Met to conduct the investigation that has taken place. Of course, we accept that those things wouldn't have happened if there weren't legitimate questions that have been made. Mr Raab went on to claim that Mr Johnson was answering to the best of his knowledge when he told MPs that COVID regulations had not been breached in Downing Street. I think it's rather different to say that he lied, which suggests that he was deliberately misleading. The Prime Minister has not to date been issued with a fixed penalty notice, Mr Raab told BBC Breakfast. Clearly we had the investigations because of the claims, the assertions that were made, which was right to follow up, and it's clear that there were breaches of the law. But to jump from that to say the Prime Minister deliberately misled Parliament rather than answering to the best of his ability is just not right. The Met has not confirmed exactly when the fines will be issued by the Criminal Records Office. The Times reports it could be several days before Downing Street and Whitehall staff receive the fines. Further fixed penalty notices are expected to be announced as the investigation progresses, but Number 10 has said the identities of recipients will remain secret, with two exceptions, Mr Johnson and Civil Service Chief Simon Case. An article written by Angus Cochran. The National Politics on Wednesday the 30th of March. Tory becomes first MP to announce they are trans. An article written by Gregor Young. A Welsh Tory has become the first ever MP to announce that they are trans. In a highly personal statement, Conservative MP Jamie Wallace revealed they've been diagnosed with gender dysphoria, were raped by a man in September last year, and are not okay. They won praise from across the political spectrum for their bravery. The message was posted online shortly before 3 a.m, following a gathering for Tory MPs, at which Boris Johnson reportedly made a joke about trans issues. The Prime Minister later hailed the MP's courage. Wallace wrote, I am trans, or to be more accurate, I want to be. I've been diagnosed with gender dysphoria and have felt this way since I was a very young child. I had no intention of ever sharing this with you. I always imagined I would leave politics well before I ever said this out loud. There was a close call in April 2020 when someone blackmailed me, outed me to my father and sent photographs to other family members. He wanted £50,000 to keep quiet. The police were so supportive, so understanding, and on this occasion the system worked. The MP said the offender was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison after admitting his guilt. For a while it seemed as though I would be able to get on with things and move on, Wallace wrote. Being an MP and hiding something like this was always going to be tough, but I arrogantly assumed I was up for it. Well, I'm not. Reflecting on being raped, they continued, I've not been myself since this incident, and I don't think I will ever recover. It's not something you ever forget, and it's not something you ever move on from. Since then, things have really taken a tumble. I'm not okay. The MP was arrested and subsequently fined over a car crash last year. Wallace said they fled the scene following the crash in November because I was terrified. I have post-traumatic stress disorder and I honestly have no idea what I was doing, except I was overcome by an overwhelming sense of fear. The personal statement came following the night out for Tory MPs, at which I was reminded of the incredible support those you work with can provide. I've had a lot of support from the whips since I was elected, the MP said. Not for the reasons you might think, but there's a lot that goes on in MPs' lives, and the whips play an important well-being role. As far as I've seen, they try their best to support and help MPs who are having a tough time. Well, they certainly earned their keep with me. Conservative MPs had gathered at the Park Plaza Hotel in London, just across Westminster Bridge from the House of Commons. At the dinner, the Prime Minister reportedly said, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," or as Keir Starmer would put it, people who are assigned female or male at birth. On Wednesday, the Prime Minister praised Wallace for his bravery in coming out as trans and sharing his very intimate story, which will undoubtedly support others. Tory party chairman Oliver Dowden said, "Proud of my colleague Jamie Wallace. As a Conservative family, we stand together and we will support you. I hope that your brave statement will help others." Other MPs expressed their support for the Conservative politician. Welsh Labour MP Chris Bryant commented, "Dear Jamie, I wish you all the very best. Colleagues across the House will respect your openness, honesty and the journey you're on." Scottish Tory Andrew Bowie replied, "Incredibly brave of you to post this. Proud of you. All power to you." His colleague David Mundell wrote, "It's an incredibly brave thing that Jamie has done, opening up not just to family, friends and colleagues, but the world in such a candid way. The spotlight is never easy, so all strength, love and solidarity to you in the coming days, and may you be a beacon for others." An article written by Gregor Young. The National News on Wednesday the 30th of March. UK ministers fume at devolved nation's stance on Queen Elizabeth Jubilee book. An article written by Xander Richards, political reporter. Ministers in London are reportedly fuming at the devolved government's refusal to distribute a book on the Queen's legacy to school children. The UK government had planned for the book, part of a year-long programme of events to mark Queen Elizabeth's 70-year reign, to be sent to every child in Scotland and Wales. There were to be 387,000 copies of the book produced in English for 1,897 primary schools in Scotland, along with 7,200 books in Gaelic for 108 schools. For Wales, London-based DK Books was contracted to produce 211,000 bilingual copies of the book to be distributed to children at around 3,000 schools. However, a source at the Labour-led Welsh Government told Wales Online that after seeing the book it was thought to be too Anglo-centric and out of touch with the reality of devolution. Mark Drakeford's Cardiff administration said that schools in Wales could opt in to receive the book if they wished, but it would not be sent out to every child automatically. Reacting to the news, a source in the London government told Wales Online that ministers in Westminster were furious. They said the top Tories can't understand what the problem is. Now the Scottish government has confirmed that it will be taking the same approach as the Welsh government. A spokesperson said, "The UK government has responsibility for the content of the book and its distribution. Schools in Scotland will have the choice whether to receive delivery. This will be facilitated by the UK Department of Education." Despite education and culture being devolved, the UK government decided to award DK Books a £12 million contract to create the books. The contract states that the book will run for 80 to 96 pages, with the precise count to be determined by DK Books. There will also be a downloadable audio version produced in each of the 3 languages, English, Welsh and Gaelic. There will also be an additional book sent out for every 30 children on a school's roll to minimise the possibility of any children not receiving a copy. The Queen celebrated her Platinum Jubilee on February the 6th this year. She is the first British monarch to sit on the throne for 70 years. A special bank holiday at the beginning of June will mark the event. An article written by Xander Richards.
Recorded from the National on the 30th of March 2022, from the Culture section, The Dark and Dangerous History of Scotland's Anthrax Island by Ninian Wilson. Grenard Island, also known as Anthrax Island, is a little spot of land off the northwest coast of the Scottish Highlands and has a notorious history, most recently extended by the inferno that engulfed it on Saturday evening. The island was made reference to as far back as the 16th century, when a clergyman named Donald Munro wrote that it was land controlled by Clan Mackenzie, full of woods and good for fostering of thieves and rebellies. That air of danger would haunt the island for centuries to come. In the 20th century, the island would become famous for being the site of experiments carried out by government scientists in 1942, where they looked to develop technology in biological warfare. The British government gathered a 50-man team to investigate the feasibility of using anthrax against their enemies in World War II. Realizing that the site of their experiments would long become toxic, a remote island would be required. After surveying Grenard Island, it was requisitioned by the government from its owners and the experiments began. With the island obtained, all they needed was a test subject. As such, a flock of sheep was penned on the island and would play victim to the British government scheme. To expose the sheep to anthrax, bombs were filled with the fatal substance and deployed close to the flock, which was contained by wooden fences. When used on people, anthrax can take effect by ingestion, skin contact, or inhalation, the last of which is the most deadly means and is deadly in around 95% of cases, regardless of treatment. If inhaled, the bacteria can cause internal bleeding, blood poisoning, and even meningitis. While it usually takes around 7 days to kill a person, the poor sheep on Grenard Island started to die after just 3. Such was the effect of the island, a subsequent report found that if used in the war, German cities would be left uninhabitable for generations. And following unsuccessful attempts to decontaminate the island, the anthrax spores persisted and forced authorities to quarantine Grenard for 48 years. It wasn't until 1986 that efforts would be made again by the government to repair the island's status. An English company was paid £500,000 to decontaminate Grenard. In doing so, they soaked the 520-acre island in 280 tons of formaldehyde that had been diluted in 2,000 tons of seawater, while also removing topsoil in sealed containers. In a bid to see if the massive regeneration effort worked, sheep were brought back to the island for the first time in half a century. The flock was put out to graze upon the recommendation of an independent watchdog set up by the Ministry of Defence to see if they would survive. They did. 4 years later on April 24, 1990, Michael Newbert, then the Junior Defence Minister, declared Grenard safe by making the half-mile trip from the mainland and removing the island's red warning sign. From then, the island carried on peacefully until Saturday evening, when it erupted in flame just 13 days after a documentary on its history was broadcast on BBC Scotland. The fire has captured the attention of social media and produced some incredible images of the flame which lit up the night sky. Despite the mesmeric photos, it seems the spectre of Grenard's dark history has continued to haunt it. Speaking to STV News, mother and daughter Nessie and Kate Gearing said they could hear the birds on the island screaming in distress as they watched on from the shore. Kate said it was horrible. I've never seen anybody on the island, no one ever goes to it, nobody wants to go to it. With its dark and dangerous history, it is of little wonder that the locals leave it be. That article was by Ninian Wilson.
From The National of Thursday the 31st of March 2022, from the comment section, DUP MP Ian Paisley Jr. brands Tories and English Nationalist Party in scathing comments. By Laura Webster. The Conservative Party is becoming more an English nationalist party that does not understand what is happening in the devolved nations, a Northern Irish MP has said. In an interview with GB News to be broadcast on Thursday, DUP MP Ian Paisley Jr. said, although it was said his natural allies in Westminster should be the Tories, he found Labour gave Northern Ireland a, quotes, far better deal. Speaking to Gloria De Piro, Paisley said, yes, the Conservatives call themselves the Conservative and Unionist Party, but I believe that the Conservative Party today is becoming more and more an English nationalist party that doesn't really understand what is going on in Scotland, certainly in Northern Ireland and in other regions. And we've got to, and I've got to, try and encourage them and educate them and help them to understand. He said, we're not little Englanders trying to be little Englanders. We're proud Northern Ireland people who have an identity of their own, and you've got to understand it and govern on that basis. Paisley said he could usually get a meeting with Boris Johnson if he wanted one, but that it was difficult to keep the Prime Minister focused on Northern Ireland because he's pulled in so many different directions. We've got to do things to draw his attention before things go bad again in Northern Ireland, and I would far rather he gets it now than reacts to a situation, he said. We've always had a better deal from Labour, he added. Any time we've had a Labour Prime Minister or a Labour Secretary of State, they've understood Northern Ireland, usually better. Their bark has been worse than your bite, you might say. We've also kind of had the fear, will Labour take us in a particular direction closer to a united Ireland? But their bark about that and their actual bite has been very, very different. Asked if he trusted Johnson to resolve the Northern Ireland protocol wrangling, he said, I don't trust anyone in politics. I've become really sceptical and I think that it's foolish to put your trust in people. We can only trust the people, that they will, hopefully, elect sensible people, and then that we can trust those people to respond positively to the messages and the political policies that we have. But the idea that I'm trusting this particular politician, I think those days have long since gone. This article was by Laura Webster.
From The National, Thursday the 31st of March 2022, from the sports section. Qatar World Cup 2022 pots confirmed by FIFA as Scotland wait to discover potential group. The World Cup may be several months away, and with the season run-in now upon us after the first international break of the year, Qatar 2022 is probably quite far from everyone's minds. However, the draw for the first Winter World Cup will take place tomorrow on Friday the 1st of April. While Scotland have yet to confirm their place at the major finals, Steve Clarke and co, of course, have a vested interest. With outstanding playoff games against Ukraine and Wales still to be played, qualification for the tournament is very much on the cards. Work still has to be done, though. But with the pots confirmed today by FIFA, in line with the latest World Cup rankings, Scotland at least now know who potentially lies in waiting. Scotland will be placed in pot 4 along with Ukraine and Wales, whoever qualifies from the tie. There are a few other undecided spots too, with the likes of New Zealand, Australia and the UAE still battling it out to make it up to the final 32 teams. And here are the confirmed pots from FIFA ahead of the big day in Doha. Pots in full. Pot 1. Qatar, Belgium, Brazil, France, Argentina, England, Spain and Portugal. Pot 2. Denmark, Holland, Germany, Mexico, USA, Switzerland, Croatia and Uruguay. Pot 3. Senegal, Iran, Japan, Morocco, Serbia, Poland, South Korea and Tunisia. Pot 4. Australia, UAE, Peru, New Zealand, Costa Rica, Scotland, Ukraine, Wales, Saudi Arabia, Ecuador, Ghana, Cameroon and Canada. This article was by Ewan Payton.
Recorded from the National on the 31st of March 2022, from the Culture section. Burrell Collection in Glasgow reopens following spectacular £68 million refurbishment, by Craig Meehan. The Burrell Collection in Glasgow will reopen to the public at 10 a.m. on Tuesday after a major refurbishment, the charity Glasgow Life today confirmed. The A-listed home of the Burrell Collection in Pollok Country Park is now a modern, greener museum that will show more of the collection to visitors and give access to more than a third more of the building. Sir William Burrell devoted more than 75 years of his life to amassing, along with his wife Constance, Lady Burrell, one of the world's greatest personal art collections, renowned for its quality of Chinese art, exquisite stained glass and intricate tapestries, as well as its breadth of fine art. The donation of the collection to the city was described at the time as one of the greatest gifts ever made to any city in the world. The collection is home to the Wagner garden carpet, which is one of the earliest surviving Persian garden carpets in the world, and has rarely been on public display since the Burrell collection first opened in 1983. The museum's refurbishment and redisplay means this priceless carpet will now be on long-term display, accompanied by new and innovative methods of interpretation. Other highlights include Chinese pottery and porcelain produced over a 5,000-year period, making it one of the most significant collections of Chinese art in Europe, paintings by renowned French artists including Monet, Cézanne, and Degas, medieval treasures including stained glass, arm and armoire, and over 200 tapestries and 150 carpets, which are among the finest in the world. Dr. Bridget McConnell, CBE, Chief Executive of Glasgow Life, said, "The Burrell Collection is one of Glasgow's great cultural institutions, displaying one of the finest personal collections ever assembled. Visitors will again appreciate one of the world's great museums and enjoy the quality and beauty of the works left to Glasgow by Sir William and Constance Lady Burrell in its spectacular home in Pollock Country Park. It is a museum for all that will bring local people back time and again, while attracting visitors from across Scotland, the UK, and from around the world to enjoy." Professor Francis Fowle, Senior Trustee of Sir William Burrell's Trust, said, "The redevelopment of the Burrell collection has been an impressive undertaking that has delivered a spectacular home for this unique collection. The additional gallery space has vastly increased the areas for display, enabling visitors to see and appreciate much more of the collection, reinterpreted through the most modern and sophisticated technology. Visitors can get to know Sir William and Constance Lady Burrell, as well as the varied and fascinating objects that they acquired, and will make new discoveries each time they visit. The refurbishment has surpassed all our expectations, establishing the Burrell collection as one of the country's most internationally significant, sustainable, and inspiring museums that has something for everyone." Sir Angus Grosset, Burrell Renaissance, said, "Sir William Burrell's unique gift to the city of Glasgow is a permanent reminder of his world-class achievement as a collector and his knowledge of the art he loved. The collection stands strongly alongside a very few such individual collections. It is wonderful that it will be enjoyed again by millions of visitors for its immense quality, diversity, and beauty. The Burrell Renaissance will lead to people around the world developing an even greater understanding of the importance of the collection and the potency of human imagination and initiative." Nearly half of the funding for the £68.25 million project was committed by Glasgow City Council, with more than a quarter coming from the National Lottery Heritage Fund and significant donations from the Scottish Government, the UK Government, trusts and private donors. Eilish McGuinness, Chief Executive of the National Lottery Heritage Fund, said, "The refurbished Burrell collection is really special. It is everything that National Lottery players can savour and enjoy. The beautiful Pollock Country Park setting, the history of this amazing collection, new displays reimagined in partnership with the local community, all housed in the sustainable design of this hugely significant listed building. The Burrell is well known in Glasgow, Scotland and the UK, but I can see that this is going to be the start of a major new chapter in the life of the museum. It is truly a beautiful landmark for the 21st century." Cultural Minister Neil Gray said, "The reopening of this nationally important museum is a reminder of how much culture is to all our lives. This ambitious refurbishment will ensure the display, with its greatly expanded exhibition space, will be more accessible to the public for years to come. Alongside the incredible pieces themselves, I was really impressed to see the new tactile, child-friendly elements around the museum, which has greatly enhanced the interaction and accessibility of the collection. The Scottish Government has contributed £5.75 million in funding to the project, which includes £750,000 to support cost increases due to the pandemic." Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack said, "I was lucky enough to get a sneak preview of the new Burrell collection last week, and it's truly magnificent. A stunning space to house one of the most important personal art collections in the world. The people of Glasgow and visitors from further afield are in for a treat when it reopens today. The UK Government is delighted to have played a part in breathing new life into this iconic museum so that it may be enjoyed for generations to come." On reopening, the museum's gallery space has increased by 35%, allowing important and unique objects from the collection, which have not been seen for decades or have never been on permanent display, to go on show. New displays will give visitors a better understanding of the international significance of the Burrell collection's artworks and the people who made them, and some of the people who have owned them. In total, 225 displays will be spread across 24 galleries. The displays include innovative digital elements such as video walls, interactive and hybrid systems created to help people engage with the stories behind the collection. The Burrell Collection's refurbishment will also bring new visitors to Glasgow's south side and to Pollock Country Park to enjoy a full day out. Pollock Country Park is Glasgow's largest green space and is home to the Pollock House, Pollock Stables and Sawmill, which will be redeveloped spectacular gardens, woodside walks and play areas. Paths and roads have been improved, benches, new signage and vehicle barriers restricting access along the main through route in the centre of the park have been installed, and electric vehicle chargers, electric shuttle bus stops and next bikes and e-bikes will prioritise active travel. For the first weekend the Burrell Collection is open, outdoor events and activities are also being delivered with support from Event Scotland's Year of Stories. A new central stairway will allow visitors to access the lower floor of the Burrell Collection for the first time, where they can watch items not on display being cared for. A new temporary exhibition space has also been created. Similar new galleries have been created on upper floors, which will take visitors to spaces in the building they have never seen before. The museum's environmental performance has been enhanced by greatly improving the building's exterior through a new roof, glazing and cladding, and by replacing power heating and lighting systems with more efficient and sustainable technologies. The changes made to the fabric of the building to make it more airtight and watertight and new glazing make it far less susceptible to changes in heat, and the upgrades of plant and systems mean the building is far more efficient and able to take advantage of new technologies in the future to lessen its impact further. The building has achieved industry standard BREEAM rating of excellent, a major achievement for a refurbishment. Architects John McCaslin and partners, appointed in 2016, are the refurbishment project's architects and landscape designers. Since the Burrell Collection closed to the public in October 2016, a comprehensive consultation and programme has engaged with more than 15,000 local people who have given their ideas, insights and opinions. This input has shaped every aspect of the redesign of the building, access to it and the redevelopment of the new displays, galleries and spaces within it and around the museum. The Scottish Parliament passed a bill in 2014 which would allow international loan of objects from and to the Burrell Collection while it was closed. Objects from the collection were seen by more than 1 million people on loan to museums in New York, Paris, Japan and London. The opening of the Burrell Collection in 1983 was one of the first demonstrations of Glasgow's commitment to culture-led regeneration. By harnessing the power of its incredible cultural draw, Glasgow has positioned itself as one of the world's greatest culture and creative cities, making it a must-visit destination. That article was by Craig Meehan.
And that was this week's The National Podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.